Since Salma was young, his parents had passed away early, so he had to live with his grandfather. The two were very close to each other, relying on each other to live. But nothing can escape the law of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Salma's grandfather also passed away not long after, leaving him alone in this world. Before dying, his grandfather told him to start a family. Then he would feel that in his final moments, he would think he had lived a beautiful life. That was like his grandfather's last wish. Now his grandfather and grandmother have reunited, leaving only him alone. In another world, the kingdom of Elfredin was trapped in an extremely difficult situation. The leaders didn't know how to best handle the crisis, so they made a move no one could have predicted. They performed high-level magic to summon a hero to help them. No one knew what would happen. Some felt excited, while the one being summoned wouldn't feel happy at all. The magicians of the country on the other side performed the hero summoning rituals. Beams of light appeared from inside the castle, shooting straight up into the dark sky. It emitted a tremendous power that shook the entire region. At that time, Salma was studying at the library because he was about to take an exam to become a civil servant. While putting away books normally, suddenly something strange happened. A spell suddenly appeared under Salma's feet and pulled him to another world, and it was the magicians of Elfredin who had summoned him to their world to be a hero. He fell freely from the sky. Fortunately, he landed safely at the place where the magicians performed the ritual. Even the magicians couldn't believe their eyes. The magicians were as confused as the protagonist, suddenly being taken from being a normal person to this place and becoming a hero. Immediately after, Salma was brought to an audience with the king and queen of the kingdom. But Salma appeared extremely annoyed after being summoned to this place so unexpectedly. The king couldn't hide his embarrassment at not being able to solve the country's problems and having to rely on an outsider like him. Salma also realized his attitude was a bit excessive, so he said, "Let him know what the current situation here is like, and he'll be upset after hearing everything clearly." The king explained that this world had many races living together in peace. But about 10 years ago, the Demon Lord's army suddenly appeared in the north, from a space called the Demon Realm that appeared in the northern end of the continent. A large number of monsters poured out, causing this place to fall into terrifying chaos. The Grand Chaos Empire, which they were very proud of for having the largest territory on the continent, served as the center. The countries decided to ally with each other to fight against this difficulty. But things weren't that easy. These monsters were very sophisticated and difficult to defeat. They had occupied 1/3 of the territory in this place, causing the countries to suffer greatly, and the Demon Lord's army had destroyed the northern countries and occupied that place as territory. The Grand Chaos Empire in the west had led the countries against the expansion of the Demon Lord's army. But the Kingdom of Elfredin refused to join the fight with other countries. Therefore, the Grand Chaos Empire required Elfredin to provide financial support, because this was a war to protect all of humanity. However, Elfredin was currently in a financial crisis and couldn't afford to pay the aid money, and they decided to summon a hero from another world to help them overcome this difficulty. The protagonist was very upset because he heard he was being put up as collateral to pay debts for people he didn't know, no different from selling a daughter to pay off debts. He asked about his future when falling into the hands of the Empire, but no one could answer him. Salma was very puzzled, not knowing how everyone defined a hero. Someone stood up and said that a hero is called a person who directs the transformation of the era. There was very little material on this definition, so it was very vague and difficult to verify. Now his future was something very difficult to talk about. According to his plan in the old world, he would become a local official and then enjoy a leisurely life. Somehow, by misfortune, he had fallen to this god-forsaken place where the people were poor. After a while using the brain of a future civil servant, he came up with an opinion, contributing a very good strategy for the country. Salma said that Elfredin needed to become stronger to no longer depend on the Empire. He suggested that the country should use the strategy of wealthy nation, strong army, which is to accumulate power to the point of being able to resist. No one believed that the strategy could be implemented. It sounded very macro, and Salma had volunteered to help them under the title of a hero. Immediately after, the king and officials brought out all the country's books for Salma to see. And after more than 3 days of meetings, the king suddenly abdicated and gave the throne to him. The newly appointed king looked a bit haggard from staying up late, with dark circles under his eyes, looking gaunt as if starving. He even married off his only daughter, Princess Lycia, to him. The news of Salma becoming king immediately spread throughout the kingdom's territories, and the 3 marquises commanding Elfredin's army were also extremely surprised when they heard the news. Everyone was shocked because they had never seen him act like this before. Princess Lycia, who was working far away, hurriedly rode a horse back to the capital because she was afraid that her parents had been usurped by Salma. But surprisingly, as soon as they found a hero for the country, The former king and his wife were being affectionate with each other, ignoring the affairs of the world. Meanwhile, Princess Lycia was very upset and afraid that the country would fall into the hands of others. But the king let her know that he actually thought Sama was talented, so he abdicated. She could accept it for the country's sake, but the marriage engagement was unacceptable. Right after that, Princess Lycia went to meet Sama directly to see what kind of person he was. On the way, Lycia thought that Sama was probably just a useless guy. But as soon as she entered, she saw him struggling with a mountain of paperwork, with dark circles under his eyes. He asked Lycia if she knew how to read. After proving that she was properly educated, able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fully, Sama decided to ask her to be his assistant. While she was making a fuss that she was a prestigious princess, why should she do such things? Sama thought she was also a new labor source, but she solemnly declared herself the former princess of this kingdom. In addition, she was also under the army of Duke Kamai. Lycia was about to start her patrol duty in the local area, but had to hurry back home. And Sama said that he was also very surprised after being suddenly elevated to king. As for the marriage, Sama would allow Lycia to freely cancel the engagement if she didn't like him. Sama had sold some of the kingdom's jewels to raise money to rebuild the country. Because the people of the kingdom were starving, keeping those things had no use. In this world, people often use some species of monsters as means of transportation. And although this world doesn't have science and technology, magic is extremely developed. Salma learned that heroes who come to this world all possess some kind of magic within themselves, and Salma was taken by the magicians of Elfredin to check his magic. Immediately after, as soon as they arrived at Salma's room, Lycia saw everyone busy working, and Salma let Lycia know that the magic he possessed was the ability to control puppets. This is the power to back up one's consciousness into an object. So by utilizing that ability, he could control pens to record multiple documents at once. It doesn't seem very fancy, but it's usable. Thanks to this magic, he could handle many tasks simultaneously and smoothly. People here are checking to see what sources of money are being used for unauthorized purposes, increasing spending compared to the plan. And if they find officials embezzling public funds, they will be dealt with appropriately. Then the proud princess also helped Salma. Salma is currently implementing some policies to arrest corrupt officials, and all their corrupt assets will be confiscated to be used for the country's development. After a day of helping Salma with paperwork, Lycia had fallen asleep on the sofa without realizing it. So Salma took the opportunity to go and peek at his fiancée for a moment. But Lycia suddenly woke up and appeared very embarrassed when she saw him standing right next to her. Looking at Salma's eyes, it was clear that he had spent a wonderful night with ledgers, paperwork, and hundreds of different tasks the night before. Salma told Lycia that he had something he wanted to show her. Then the two rode horses as dawn was breaking. On horseback, the two talked a lot. Lycia asked Salma if there was a family or a lover back in the other world, but Salma declined, saying that in the other world, only he remained. Salma took the princess to the inedible field, which consumed so much of the state budget. It was the cotton field. Then Salma seriously analyzed for Lycia to understand the methods and development directions for the country in the future. If Salma were no longer here, Lycia would be the one to lead the country's development in his place. Lycia felt confused when a king like Salma went down to the canteen to have breakfast with the soldiers, and Salma came down here to eat to avoid wasting money and overly luxurious meals. The two friends were sitting talking when the captain of the knights, Lorwyn, came to ask to eat with them, and he showed great interest in Salma's new policies to change the country. However, Salma still appeared troubled because there was no talented person inside the palace. But there was one exception, that was Prime Minister Mark. And Salma learned that the kingdom of Elfredin possessed a device that could broadcast images throughout the country. So he wanted to use it to recruit talents to the capital to work. Right after that, Salma used the broadcasting device to make a new announcement to all the people, and he strenuously called for them to come to the capital to participate in a talent contest. Those who achieved the highest achievements in their field would be selected for direct admission and become officials in the palace. With his inspiring words, the people here were persuaded. Everyone was very excited. They didn't need to participate, just introducing someone would earn them money. The broadcast ended, and it seemed Salma had achieved what he wanted. He wore a triumphant smile. Lycia worried that Salma would return to his world after reviving Elfredin, so she decided to marry Salma to try to keep him in this world. The finalists of the talent contest were brought to the palace to meet Salma, and this event was being broadcast live for all the people throughout the kingdom to watch. When meeting Salma, the contestants knelt before him, except for the dark elf warrior named Aisha, because according to the customs of the dark elf tribe, they only kneel before their master. And all the dark elf tribespeople in this kingdom live in a place called the Guardian Forest. Prime Minister Mark informed that Aisha was the strongest warrior in the kingdom of Elfredin. But Aisha didn't want to accept the prize money and only wanted to request Salma to help her with something. Aisha said that the guardian forest of the Dark Elf tribe hadn't had any saplings growing for many years. And upon hearing that, Salma realized that the Dark Elf tribe had never pruned the trees in the forest, because they needed to trim the leaves of the large trees so that the small trees below would have light to develop. After hearing Salma's explanation, Aisha knelt down before him, and Aisha vowed to be Salma's concubine and begged him to come to the guardian forest to show the Dark Elf tribe how to prune trees. The next person to step up for an audience with Salma was a beautiful female singer named Yuna. And seeing that Salma seemed fascinated by her, Lycia felt a bit jealous. Salma had suggested that Yuna sing a song to motivate people throughout the kingdom. And Salma wanted Yuna to try singing a song from the king's homeland, but she didn't know the lyrics. But fortunately, when coming to this world, Salma had brought along his iPhone 14 Pro Max. So Salma gave Yuna AirPods and played the homeland music for her to listen. Right after that, Yuna sang a Wibu song for all the people in the kingdom to hear. And after hearing Yuna's wonderful voice, everyone had to acknowledge her talent. Princess Zeroa of the Kingdom of Eidonia in the west had also heard about Salma's talent recruitment contest. And she also acknowledged Salma as a very talented person, although he had just become king. In her eyes at that moment, there was only the image of this new king. The next contestant came for the interview. A clumsy fat friend named Poncho was stepping up to meet Salma, but tripped and fell face first. And Poncho was a food review god who had tried many delicious dishes throughout the kingdom. Upon hearing that, Salma was very pleased because he didn't know anything about the cuisine of this world. And after being granted a position in the palace by Salma, he was moved to tears. Because he never thought that reviewing food would one day lead to becoming an official. This new king seems to be very popular with the people, probably because he is an intelligent, quick-witted person who knows how to handle crises and understands the people. People flocked to the palace to contribute to helping the country. After rewarding Poncho, a man named Hakusa stepped up for an audience with Salma. And Hakusa was known as someone with a good memory and extremely extensive knowledge. Salma asked what kind of books Hakusa liked and often read. It was literature. He added that cultivating unknown knowledge was his reason for living. Salma suggested if he would like to be a librarian in the castle library. Hakusa declined and asked permission to dedicate his talent to help Salma become the ruler of the world. With Hakusa's confident demeanor, looking at the new king's treatment of the fat Poncho, he also had his own opinion. After a tense battle of wits with each other, Salma gave Hakusa the position he desired. So Salma quickly appointed a rare talent like him to be his military advisor. Then, thanks to the vision of the country's leader, with Hakusa's talent, he is the one named as the Black Prime Minister. The last contestant was a little beastman girl named Tomo. And Tomo had a very special talent, which was talking to animals. People were discussing Tomo's talent when the little girl was given the special opportunity to talk privately with Salma. And after hearing the little girl say something, Salma was extremely surprised. In this world, all races from elves to beast folk are classified in the same species as humans. But the demon tribe is classified as a different species, although some of them also have human form. The slimy Zenli species, which looks exactly like monsters to the king, is considered animals by the people here. So according to the king's thinking, monsters are different creatures that look uniform with each other. Among them, there are some that have human-like shapes, but the special thing is that their minds are just like ordinary wild beasts. Because the demon tribe has no intelligence, they also don't know how to speak human language. Salma called his close aides along with Tomo into his private room to talk. And everyone was extremely shocked to know that Tomo also had the ability to talk to the demon tribe. The demon tribe previously had no intelligence, but the demon tribes in the demon lord's territory are very smart, because they can behave like humans, as well as know how to use weapons with magic. However, even so, they still speak a language completely different from humans, and Tomo had used her ability to communicate with a demon tribe member while going into the forest. The demon even spared Tomo's life before their troops arrived at the girl's location. After hearing Tomo's story, Salma thought that they could completely communicate with the demon tribe, and he believed that they could even negotiate peace with the demon tribe. But Salma still didn't want other countries to know about Tomo's special ability, because he feared that some countries would exploit the girl's ability to form alliances with the demon tribe. Lorwyn and everyone also quickly agreed with Salma's production decision, and especially the kingdom of Eidonia in the west was continuously provoking their Elfredin. Salma would let Tomo and her family live in the palace for the convenience of protecting the girl. Therefore, Lycia was extremely happy because she had always wanted to have a younger sister. But Tomo quickly refused because the girl still had her mother and younger brother in the refugee camp. Salma quickly moved forward to console her that if the girl became the king's sister, her mother and younger brother would also be related to him. they could live together in the palace without fear. Then he ordered Mark to wait for a while before announcing and proceeding with this adoption. And to keep things safe, the little rabbit girl was assigned to take care of the horses that served to pull the king's carriage. The girl was very happy to receive this favor. The next day, Salma went to borrow Lycia's room to sit and make some strange doll, because his room was being used by officials to do bookkeeping work. But when seeing them sitting together in the room, the maid thought these two were being intimate. Salma and Lycia hurriedly went out to meet Pancho when they heard the news that he had just returned to the palace, and Pancho had traveled all over the kingdoms and brought back a bag of rare food as requested by him. And the food bag he brought back was not an ordinary one. It was stored in a bag called the Royal Treasure, which is something extremely rare. Immediately after, Salma organized a cooking show for all the people to watch. And Salma said that the kingdom's food shortage situation was very serious, so he wanted to guide people on how to cook some foods that they didn't know about. However, when seeing the first dish was octopus meat, the girls showed extreme panic. But Yuna said that people from the sea area like her often eat octopus. Our king put on a polite apron, rolled up his sleeves to enter the kitchen to demonstrate his talent. Salma had sliced the octopus tentacles into thin slices and then battered them crispy. The aroma spread out, making many people unable to refuse. When holding the food in their hands, everyone was a bit hesitant to try. But when they bit into it, their taste buds exploded. And when tasting it, the girls felt that his crispy fried octopus was so delicious that they couldn't stop eating. And the people also wanted to go catch some octopus to cook like that. The next dish was the root of a plant commonly found in the forest called burdock. And Salma just needed to sprinkle a little salt and sugar on the pile of roots, and they became an extremely delicious dish. It was crispy and salty. Tomo wanted to let her mother and younger brother try it so much. When it came to fried grasshopper meat, everyone felt extremely scared. But Tomo could eat the fried grasshopper dish deliciously because the beast tribe often ate this dish. Salma was very surprised to know that this dish had been marinated with a little soy sauce before frying. And after trying one, Salma was moved to tears that he couldn't control, because it had been a long time since he had tasted soy sauce flavor like on Earth. Everyone was extremely surprised when they saw Pancho bring out the corpse of a Zelen, because just making a slight cut on the surface would make the slime species dissolve into water immediately without leaving a mark. But Pancho had used a stick to break the core of the Zelen without damaging its outer surface. After processing the slime's body into a thin piece, Pancho had cut it into strands, and he put those Zelen strands into a pot of water and cooked it like cooking noodles. Feeling that the slime noodle dish looked a bit creepy, everyone suggested Salma try it first, and he also hesitated a bit but forced himself to swallow to set an example for everyone. But just after eating a piece, Salma felt this dish was extremely delicious and praised it highly. Salma described the food in a very authentic and captivating way, making others want to try it. The food was slippery and chewy. When bitten, it had a unique feeling like crunching in the mouth. And seeing him eat so deliciously, the girls also quickly sat at the table to try it. Everyone cleaned out the entire pot of Zelen noodles deliciously before the witness of all the people. But the broadcast time was limited, so Salma had to end the cooking show here. Thanks to the recent cooking show, the food shortage situation has been temporarily handled, and Mark had asked Salma to allow him to retire to his hometown and pass the position of Prime Minister to Hakusa. But the kingdom was now very short of manpower, so Salma had suggested that he stay and take a small official position in the palace. Immediately after, Salma was walking in the yard when he suddenly saw Aisha and Lycia practicing together, and they had a battle that shook heaven and earth, making Salma very surprised. But he had to hurry to stop them because he was afraid that this castle would collapse. The country was already in shortage, and fighting like this would be quite costly. The two couldn't determine who was better until they received the king's order to stop. Today Salma had a day off, so he invited Lycia to go for a walk around town with him, and he had also suggested Aisha go along to guard them. The three of them had disguised themselves as students of the military school to avoid being recognized by others. But Salma felt that the student uniform didn't quite fit Aisha's sexy figure, and Salma had also told the two girls to change the way they addressed him, and not call him as usual. Immediately after, while walking, Aisha suddenly felt extremely hungry, so Salma suggested everyone go to Yuna's cafe to find something to eat. And just meeting, Yuna quickly recognized that they were in disguise for an incognito trip. Yuna said that the Zelen noodle dish that Pancho came up with is currently very popular with diners. But seeing Salma always looking adoringly at the beautiful woman, Lycia and Aisha showed extreme discomfort. When first meeting Aisha, everyone felt she was a very strong elf warrior, but now she revealed herself to be just a clumsy, food-loving girl. In the subsequent conversation, Salma learned that men in this world are allowed to have multiple wives, and under the title of first wife, Lycia allowed Salma to take 7 more wives. Therefore, Aisha and Yuna had also begun to plan to become his concubine. The kingdom of Elfredin has more than 100,000 troops, but the king only commands half of the military force, while the other half is under the command of the 3 Marquillas, especially Duke Kamai's infantry force. But the 3 Marquillas seem to be opposing Salma becoming king. So a war between Salma and the 3 Marquillas could very well take place in the near future. Everyone was talking when they suddenly saw a couple sitting arguing next to them because the soldier named Haru wanted to side with Duke Kamai to confront Salma. So his friend Isekai'd, who works for the royal army, was trying to stop him. Haru was happy, thinking that war was the best opportunity for him to get promoted. But Isekai'd feared that other countries would take advantage of this civil war to invade Elfredin. Salma recalled Hakusa's advice about their relationship with the Federated States, and there was no country in this area friendly to their Elfredin, especially the kingdom of Eidonia in the west, which was always waiting to invade Elfredin. To the southeast, it borders the Union of Eastern States in the north, the Duchy of Eidonia in the west, the Republic of Togis in the southwest. More dangerously, there is also the 9-headed dragon archipelago Union in the southeast, separated by the sea. Then to the west of the Duchy of Eidonia is the mercenary country. Even more sadly, the number of countries with a friendly attitude towards the kingdom is around 0. Neutral is 4, and enemies is 1. Salma was very worried because his country was in an isolated situation. However, Salma is currently facing the risk of civil war with the 3 Marquillas, and Haru had supported Kamai because he was protecting the nobles whose assets were confiscated by Salma. But Isekai'd revealed that those nobles were all corrupt, so they had all their assets confiscated. The two were arguing when Salma stepped in front of them. And just seeing Salma, Isekai'd was shocked to recognize that he was the king of Elfredin. But Haru showed a disrespectful attitude towards Salma because he still hadn't recognized that he was the king. So Aisha angrily threatened Haru to let him know who was sitting in front of him. After knowing Salma was the king of Elfredin, Haru was so scared that he wet himself. But Salma didn't blame Haru for choosing to enlist with Duke Kamai. However, Salma learned that Haru and Isekai'd were childhood friends. So if Haru chose to side with Kamai, he would have to be ready to fight Isekai'd because she was an officer of the royal army under Salma's command. After hearing those things, Haru realized that he would have to face his close friend if civil war broke out, so he decided not to follow Kamai anymore. When the 3 had their own space, the bodyguard was busy pursuing her dream. Lycia praised Salma for handling the previous situation very well. He chose to say the hard words so that the 2 close friends wouldn't be put in a difficult position. But Salma declined, saying that he just said what he thought and didn't think that much about it. Lycia took the initiative to ask Salma if he wanted to rest his head on her lap. Salma was slightly surprised, but after hearing the assertion that they were dating each other, Salma also reduced his caution and shyly rested his head on her lap. The two talked to each other about the future. Salma said that marrying someone you love would be wonderful. Lycia seriously asked the protagonist if he still had no feelings for her in the future. Lycia's question made Salma extremely confused. The two fell into a silence. To break this stifling and scary silence, the bodyguard spoke up, complaining that she still had to pretend to sleep until when would she be able to escape this role. Hearing this, Salma and Lycia quickly returned to their initial state. The two were shy and blushed. A few days later, Salma had made a doll and used the puppet control technique to manipulate it. And Salma was playing with the doll when Haru's father suddenly asked to meet him. It turned out that Isekai'd had told Haru's father everything that happened at Yuna's cafe. And being a general under Salma's command, he had given Haru a beating for wanting to side with Duke Kamai. However, Salma advised him to hit gently, or he would lose his heir, and he had asked Haru to join the royal army and become the deputy team leader for Isekai'd's team. Immediately after, Haru's father suddenly asked to speak privately with Salma, and after hearing his story, Salma was extremely shocked. Salma had secretly sent his puppet to join an adventurer group in the city, because he wanted to use this puppet to explore the underground sewers. When going down under the city, Salma's puppet, along with that adventurer group, had eliminated many monsters, but they had always thought that Salma's puppet was a real person. From large white snakes to dinosaurs, Salma's puppet could handle them all. But this time they encountered a purple monster that looked extremely scary. From its mouth flowed a disgusting amount of drool. The whole group saw that they couldn't deal with this one, so they ran away. While retreating, unfortunately, Salma's puppet tripped and fell. At that moment, his teammate threw a bomb toward the monster. The monster, in pain, shot many bullets from its body. When some stray bullets were about to hit the member who had thrown the bomb, Salma's puppet used its body to shield her. Then everyone successfully left that dark place. Outside, the girl cleaned the puppet, thanking him for saving her. Everyone in the team was curious, wondering what the puppet was thinking at that moment. and after each exploration, Salma usually cleaned his puppet very thoroughly. While bathing, Lycia walked in. Seeing the puppet, she said that it seemed bigger than the last time, didn't it? Salma didn't mention anything about size. He said that he sent this puppet down the tunnels to see what the underground passages would be like. The next day, he gathered Lycia and the state officials, thanking them for their diligent work day and night. Salma also said they were his treasures, and they had enough capital to build the city of Venetinova. Salma let Lycia know that he was planning to build a coastal city in the south, and this city would become the center for buying, selling, and exporting goods from Elfridin. In the Bay Area, he planned to build a port. Building a new city would be convenient for transporting goods both by land and water. If this city succeeds, it will be the heart of the country. The roads around it are the blood vessels. Then Salma patiently explained to Lycia how important the distribution of goods was. Indeed, he has a far-reaching vision. But when he presented his ideas to the court officials, they were amazed, mouths agape. Then he announced that with everyone's contributions, they would have 5 days off. He intended to reward them with medals, but that would go against his and the country's austerity policy. So he would compensate with days off, and give them the right to take bottles of wine from the cellar. After the meeting, Lycia wondered if Salma was acting a bit excessive. He also admitted that he started working early, so his mind was a bit hazy. However, Lycia was worried about Salma's health because lately, he had been doing too much work. And Salma said that if he died, Elfridin could summon another hero. But just as Salma dozed off, Lycia whispered that she only needed Salma, accompanied by a very passionate kiss. The next day, Salma and everyone went to the southern coast to start building the new city. But Lorwyn informed that the locals were opposing their city construction. Lorwyn said that the villagers opposed building here because it would anger the sea god. Hearing about the sea god, Salma was very skeptical and turned back to ask Lycia if there were sea gods in this era. Lycia stammered, saying that there were people who believed in those gods, but she thought those gods didn't exist. Salma's subordinates also believed that those things were just superstitions. Salma went to meet an old village chief to ask why the locals were opposing. At first meeting, the old man still showed an arrogant, haughty attitude, but when he heard that the person in front of him was the king of the kingdom, the old man could only exclaim, "Your Majesty." Everyone had a serious conversation with the old man. He recounted that people passed down from generation to generation. That place was very dangerous, so no one dared to live there. And that old man had explained that this sea area was the territory of a sea god, so anyone who built a city here would be submerged by the sea god with a wave. However, the story about the sea god who could create a giant wave had happened hundreds of years ago, and Salma realized that the sea god that the old man mentioned was a tsunami. But the time intervals between tsunamis might be far apart, so the officials helping Salma couldn't know. But that didn't make Salma give up. He would still continue with the plan to build the heart of the country. However, it would be a little different. If they continued to build the city at the old location, it would possibly be submerged by a tsunami someday. So Salma had the city construction site moved a little further south. He still wanted his city to be able to withstand a tsunami. Salma mentioned the signs of a tsunami according to the experience of the village elders. That is, when a tsunami is about to happen, the ground will shake violently. Or that phenomenon is called an earthquake. Earthquakes under the sea are the movement of fault lines causing the seabed to rise and fall. Salma kept explaining, while those present were amazed, mouths agape. Later, Salma realized he had spoken too much, so he stopped explaining. Finally, he drew the lesson that when a tsunami occurs, the locals should have shelter on high ground. They need to spread this news to the people living in the Bay Area. On this side, Lycia and the bodyguard sat listening, and had no comments to contribute. The two admired Salma because he was very diligent in building the country. The bodyguard sighed that His Majesty really cares a lot about the kingdom. Then Lycia asked the bodyguard if she liked Salma. The other girl didn't hesitate but stood up immediately, saying that she extremely respected His Majesty. Humans in this world still have the technology to make giant battleships at sea, but they couldn't make engines to help the ships move by themselves. So they had to train a species of sea dragons to pull ships around the sea. By Salma's order, Isekai'd had commanded a team of royal soldiers to go south to build roads for the city. And when seeing royal soldiers like himself having to build roads, Haru showed extreme discomfort. But Haru was as silent as a clam, not daring to object when meeting Salma. Royal soldiers building the city, everyone looked exhausted, and they were wearing white shirts for labor instead of work clothes. It quickly came to lunchtime. Haru took a bite of the dish that Salma came up with called ginger grilled meat. He had to praise it as delicious. He also acknowledged that Salma was very talented in cooking. Going with the flow, Isekai'd talked about how Salma sent people to the wolf tribe to get spices for cooking. That directive both helped that clan make a living and helped people in the kingdom have good food. It was indeed killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Along with that, Isekai'd also mentioned things that Salma did to transport food, such as building roads and innovating foods. Thanks to that, the food scarcity had decreased significantly. Haru was amazed, not expecting Salma to have such a frighteningly far-sighted vision. Then he said he would take a nap after lunch. Not unexpectedly, this was also encouraged by the new king for everyone to sleep after eating to increase productivity. Right after that, Salma and everyone went out to survey the construction of the rural road. Salma came to Haru, asking him to join everyone for the survey for fun. And these new roads could completely withstand the heavy load of the beasts pulling carts. He also had demon-repelling trees planted, because these trees usually emit vibrations that monsters and wild creatures hate. Those trees would be like a natural protective layer to prevent wild animals from coming to cause harm. But this also showed Salma's subtlety. He didn't plant them too densely or too sparsely, with moderate spacing, so as not to affect other animals. Salma even used ships that could glow in the night to make street lights. Everyone was standing talking when they suddenly saw a messenger bird flying to Aisha. And Aisha was extremely panicked when she learned that her elf village had just experienced an earthquake. More than half of Aisha's village along with many elf tribespeople had been buried by the earthquake. So Salma tried to encourage Aisha and mobilized the soldiers here to go to her village to rescue people. When Aisha showed hesitation, Salma said that he was in a position where he could call many people, so just let him help. No need to be hesitant at all. Hearing this, Aisha was moved to tears. Salma said that Aisha should lead the soldiers into the Guardian Forest to rescue everyone. Don't dawdle. Disaster relief is a battle against time. Isekai'd went to mobilize forces right there. Lycia was assigned to return to the royal capital to request more rescue teams, then report to Hakuya to transfer relief items to the elf village. Lycia quickly went to do it without delay, but a new problem emerged. Moving from here to the elf village also takes 2 full days. It can't be any faster. Salma asked Haru if there was any magic that could teleport in one go to appear at the needed place. Hearing this, Haru was embarrassed immediately, asking back that if there was such a spell, why would they sweat to build roads? Indeed, Haru hated that he couldn't punch Salma once to vent the anger in his heart. While racking his brain thinking, a beast-drawn carriage passed by, and a new idea appeared in his head. After traveling by horse carriage, the rescue team had reached the elf village, and Salma had talked with Aisha's father, who was also the village chief, to understand the current situation. Salma said that he had brought 50 Imperial guards here, and after a few more days, there would definitely be a second rescue team bringing aid supplies here. The village chief's turn, he said that the landslide occurred in the eastern part of the village. Casualties were more than 100 people, and the number of missing people was more than 40. Salma said, "Chief, please make a list and check what the exact numbers are. Also, assign people to watch the mountain. If the mountain shakes or makes any strange sounds, report immediately." Aisha stepped up to take on this mission. Her father also supported her because she and her friends often played in this forest, so she knew the paths and ways very well in it. It would be convenient to call her friends along too. When understanding the terrain of this land, Salma quickly commanded the soldiers to rescue people trapped under piles of earth and rocks. He instructed everyone not to overexert themselves. When rescuing and seeing a landslide, they must retreat immediately. Then Salma and everyone made efforts to rescue and search for the missing people. And Salma controlled a wooden mouse to crawl into the rubble to support the rescue work. Thanks to it, Salma had rescued a person trapped under a large tree trunk. After completing the rescue work, Aisha's father showed great gratitude for Salma's support. But there were still many people who had died while waiting for Salma's rescue team to come and help. There was a person who, because he lost his wife due to the landslide, had said some extreme words to Salma. But Salma also sympathized and understood the situation of that person. Outside, Aisha explained that it was that uncle who was the strongest opponent to the pruning of trees in the forest, because he thought that this forest had a mission, so if trees were pruned, it would look extremely weak. So Salma had another lecture on what should be done this way and that way to be correct. So Salma blamed himself for not arriving in time to save all the victims. After finishing the work in the village, the army said goodbye and returned to the kingdom. Aisha stood on a rock looking at the royal soldiers who were tired and sleepless from participating in the rescue at her village. Salma was no exception. He looked extremely tired. Lycia blamed herself for not being able to help in this rescue. Salma consoled her that she had already helped by calling for rescue. Everyone had already done their best. Salma turned to blame himself because he had not done a good job as a king. According to him, a leader's job, besides commanding the country, must also predict and come up with plans to deal with emergencies that occur. Salma had been negligent in that. Lycia consoled him that he had done very well. Don't blame himself like that anymore. Then Salma listed many things he still lacked and hadn't been able to do. If he didn't list them, it would be fine, but listing them showed there were quite a lot. He was so stressed that he cried. After returning to the capital, Yuna went to Salma's room because she was worried about his health. Recently, Salma had to handle many things, up to the earthquake in the elf village. Opening the door, instead of seeing Salma sitting at the desk seriously reviewing documents, today perhaps due to exhaustion, he was sprawled on the bed looking at documents. Seeing Yuna, he quickly put them away. Yuna asked Salma, "Haven't been able to sleep lately?" He said that lately he had been feeling tired, with many things spinning around in his head, so he couldn't sleep. Yuna entered the room and told Salma to sleep. Hearing this, he was a bit confused but obediently lay down to let Yuna lull him to sleep. Yuna sang a song with a very gentle melody to help him fall asleep. Meanwhile, the three dukes were meeting to discuss whether to recognize Salma as king or not, and Duchess Wanter thought that the people had become more prosperous since Salma became king. Therefore, she fully supported him becoming a legitimate king of this kingdom. However, Duke Kamai would not accept someone from another world as king, and Duke Castor also wanted to ally with Kamai to be able to depose Salma from the throne. Hearing this, the Duchess could not sit still anymore, stood up and asked if he craved the throne that much. But that Duke only wanted to depose the new king to restore the throne to King Anbek. Duchess Wanter had asked Castor to cut ties with his wife and children in case he lost the battle, because Castor's wife and children were also the daughter and grandchildren of hers. But Castor's eldest daughter named Kana demanded to fight alongside her father. Her goal of fighting was because Salma had deposed King Anbek and Salma had touched Lycia, her close friend. King Geusilia of the Kingdom of Eidonia had also realized that Elfredin was about to have a civil war, and he and Prince Julius were plotting to ambush Elfredin right when the civil war took place. But Princess Zora thought they shouldn't attack Elfredin because Eidonia was also very poor. On this side, after giving Salma the report of the recent harvest, Hakuyo announced that the food shortage had been met almost enough, and they could proceed to the next step. It turned out that Salma's next step was the intention to conquer other countries. Gaius had gathered all the generals of Eidonia to be ready to attack Elfredin. The clear target was the food area in the southwest of Elfredin, but a civil officer named Cobbett had tried to stop him from marching. Before he could finish his sentence, he received the soul of the king's shoe in his face. He grumbled that all day he had to hear things like "this is not the time, need to reform this and that policy," and the result was still losing. That civil officer still tried to continue saying that if their country unilaterally attacked Salma's kingdom, they would be criticized, because all countries had signed the Human Declaration to fight against the demon tribe of the Empire. Briefly about the Human Declaration, it was a declaration to prevent the Demon Lord's territory from continuing to send troops southward. Then the Empire with the largest territory on the continent and the strongest military force would block monsters and demon tribes, and humanity must stop conflicts and join forces to become a united entity. In that declaration, there were 3 clauses. One of the clauses was not accepting changes to national borders by conflicts between humans. Therefore, if they unilaterally attacked Elfredin, they could be intervened by the Empire, because he believed that human countries should now unite to fight against the demon tribe instead of conquering each other. However, Elfredin had never participated in the human alliance against the demon tribe, so Prince Julius believed that attacking Elfredin had nothing to do with fighting against the demon tribe. And then Cobbett was dismissed. Meanwhile, Salma was making contact with the 3 dukes through a communication device. Salma boldly declared that if from now on they didn't follow his orders anymore, he would see everyone as traitors. The Duchess voiced to ask what Salma intended to do with the territories of the 3 dukes. Salma expressed that if they obeyed him, he would not touch them. The armies of the 3 dukes would also be merged with the Imperial Guards. A new, extremely powerful army would be born. He would also abolish the privilege of maintaining armies in the territories of the 3 dukes. The dukes felt admiration for Salma's thinking. That Duchess then asked about the city that Salma was planning to build, perhaps because she was afraid that the new city would affect her territory, so she had to fence beforehand to be sure. Receiving a very satisfactory answer from Salma's position, it seems the Duchess had cast a vote in favor of Salma, but Vargas and Castor still refused to recognize Salma as the king of this kingdom. However, only 100 soldiers supported the Duke. The remaining army he didn't summon, keeping them neutral. That shows that Duke Vargas had thought about losing even before it began. And Kamai's infantry force along with Castor's air force would join forces to depose him. Then they would bring Lycia's father back to be king as before. Although confronting each other, they were still very humane, thinking for the opponent too. Right after that, Lycia had cut off her ponytail to show her determination to support Salma. And being her master, Duke Kamai had also felt that determination. After Kamai and Vargas left the group call, Yuna suddenly appeared next to Wanter. And it turned out that Yuna was the granddaughter of this over 5-year-old Duchess Wanter. Yuna had let Wanter know that Salma was a clean and upright king, so she quickly recognized Salma as the official king of Elfridon. And Salma doesn't have to fight alone. Everyone is always here and is his reliable ally. Gaius had led a force of 30,000 troops from Eidonia into Elfridon's territory through the Usen Gorge, and his first conquest target was the city of Antimira located in the border area. Because he didn't want to fight with Gaius, the Lord of Antimira had surrendered to him. But inside the city, there were still many Elfridon people who wanted to resist the Amidonian army. They formed two factions, the anti-war faction and the resistance to the end faction. Neither side would yield. The Lord came to beg for a little more time, but that Gaius didn't care about anyone. He said he could attack at any time. The Lord, hearing this, could only bow his head trembling. He tried to say that if he was given a little more time, he would gather the opinions of the people in the city as quickly as possible. After receiving strategic advice, Gaius agreed to wait a bit for the city gates to open instead of just ramming in as he had thought. So the Lord asked to return to the city to persuade everyone to surrender. And Gaius had agreed because if they fought here, his military force would suffer very heavy damage. Meanwhile, Salma's troops along with Kamai's infantry had begun fierce fighting. In just one short night, Salma had all the soldiers use earth magic to build a fortress right in front of Kamai's fortress. According to the girl with the rat tail, this was Salma's plan called the One Night Castle Project. Indeed, an amazing person, Salma always thinks of and does things no one could have predicted. After failed negotiations with the three dukes, he immediately ordered 10,000 imperial guards to go build a fortress. This fortress was also called a giant rhino ship on land. However, Kamai's troops had brought out several cannons to bombard Salma's troops' fortress. Not beyond expectation, the first shot had already made a fairly large hole in the fortress. Then consecutive shots like rain on this fortress, and some dark elf tribe warriors quickly appeared to support his side, because they wanted to repay Salma after being helped by him in the previous earthquake. The young men of the elf tribe were extremely strong, just using bows and arrows to break the enormous cannonballs. The elf tribe people even said that shooting these was easier than shooting eagles. Immediately after, Lorwyn had pulled the cavalry out of the fortress to destroy all of Kamai's artillery. Soldiers poured out like a storm. Rapidly, everyone was eager to fight, brimming with strength. Everyone had the common goal of wanting to defeat those who came here to break this peaceful life. They performed fire magic to burn those cannons. Just starting out and already achieving such resounding success, who could stand it? On this side, Duke Kamai was also very tense when hearing his minions come here to report. And the corrupt nobles clinging to Kamai showed great concern when seeing his troops at a disadvantage. Nevertheless, Kamai remained confident that Salma could not win this battle, because his side had 40,000 troops while Salma only brought 10,000 troops. Gaius had waited until late afternoon, but still didn't see the Lord of Antimira return to meet him. He ordered the soldiers to attack this city. But as he was about to order all the soldiers to assault the city, the Lord suddenly ran out. Gaius showed extreme anger when he learned that the Lord still couldn't persuade everyone to open the city gates to surrender. Hearing this, Gaius was very angry. He drew his sword intending to behead that Lord out of spite. He said that now in the kingdom, there were still factions wanting to resist to the end that were willing to die. So the Lord brought out a pile of gold and begged him to try to wait one more day. So Gaius gave him a deadline of noon the next day, when the shadows of the two trees beside touched each other. If not, he would order the troops to assault the city. It turned out that Duchess Wanter had ordered the Lord to pretend to deceive Gaius to buy time. She said that now time was as precious as gold, so if they could exchange gold for time, that would not be bad at all, and they would wait for Salma to bring reinforcements after he defeated Kamai and Castor. While having dinner, Kaze and Haru were giving the soldiers guarding here a hard time, and Kaze felt very happy because Haru had chosen to stand on Salma's side to fight with her. Meanwhile, Duke Castor was still waiting for Salma's troops to attack his fortress, and after reconsidering, he had to admit that Salma was indeed a very talented king, but it would be too humiliating to surrender now, so he had to continue to combat Salma. Kana suddenly returned to report to Castor that Salma's troops had appeared near their fortress, but they were all very surprised to see Salma put wheels on a battleship and have monsters pull it up onto the shore. Immediately after, Salma had called Castor and asked him to quickly surrender. But Castor refused, so he had the battleship fire directly at his fortress. Castor laughed out loud, saying that Salma was a formidable person. He did things no one expected. After some back and forth, the bottom line was still not surrendering, so Salma hung up first. Castor had ordered Kana to lead an air force riding dragons to go out and engage. And Kana had encountered many difficulties when being attacked by the battleship's anti-aircraft system. She ordered bombs to be dropped from above. The whole team hadn't had time to do anything when Salma's artillery had attacked first. The attack was unexpected, so she only had time to command everyone to disperse to dodge. She realized that they should attack at the blind spot to have a higher chance of winning. The weakness of this war machine was the wheels. After realizing this, she had ordered everyone to attack there. They would try to destroy and capture Salma. Then she put all her effort into attacking, with a bit of regret in Kana's heart. She should have helped Lycia as a subordinate, not as they were now, enemies of each other like this. Finally, after so much effort, Kana and the Air Force had successfully destroyed the cannons of the battleship. But when boarding the battleship, they found no one inside. And it turned out that Salma had used his puppet control technique to control the battleship. Now Kana realized she had fallen into Salma's trap. He deliberately did so to lure this squad out. And he, along with everyone else, had infiltrated Castor's fortress to fight with him. In the castle at this moment, a confrontation was taking place between Salma and Castor. Salma had told Castor to surrender to avoid fighting, but he immediately refused, and following Salma's order, Aisha had drawn her sword and stepped up to fight with Castor. But Castor was an old man who had lived for hundreds of years, so Aisha encountered many difficulties when confronting him. Aisha expressed that she loved the king very much. She wanted to stay with the king and princess forever. Castor praised her loyalty, but said that now she should try to protect herself, as she was in a dangerous situation. Saying that, Castor swung a sword down to defeat Aisha, but Salma had his puppet rush up along with Lycia to support Aisha. So Aisha successfully launched a fatal blow to defeat Castor. Castor lay on the ground, trying to say his final stubborn words. He said that he had fought with all his might until the last moment, so he had no regrets. After Castor was defeated, Lycia explained to him that Salma was a good king. Salma looked outside and saw a thick white smoke rising. Salma realized that his battleship had exploded, and the Air Force was returning. They had to hurry. She had put on Castor a slave collar that could tighten his neck if he dared to resist Salma. Although Lycia didn't seem to want to do it, she had to because he had betrayed her and Salma. Kana had arrived, saw her father wearing a slave collar, and was about to draw her sword to attack Salma, but was stopped by Lycia. And Kana also quickly surrendered when she saw her father defeated. Then she also had to wear a collar like her father. Salma turned to Toma, saying that from now on, he would be the Air Force general, requesting him to lead the Air Force under the Imperial Guards. He and the Air Force quickly flew straight to Kamai's fortress. Being close friends, Lycia had told Salma to take Kana as a concubine to help her escape punishment. But he had refused because the crime of opposing the king of both father and daughter, she had to be punished as usual. Right after that, the Knights of the Air Force had flown to bomb Kamai's fortress, so he had to accept defeat and ordered all troops to surrender. And he had also arrested the corrupt nobles following his side to hand over to Salma. Kamai had told his dog-faced subordinate to put a slave collar on him similar to Castor's. And Salma, along with everyone, had also received news of surrender from Kamai's side. But Kamai was very surprised to learn that Salma was leading troops straight to the west. It turned out the king was aiming at bigger fish. Then he was very happy, saying that the princess and the king should hold hands to overcome this old, withered body. It turned out that the corrupt nobles had conspired to hire mercenaries from abroad to depose Salma. So Kamai had pretended to rebel to gather them in one place and catch them all. Kamai sat in his room. This could be the last moments he was allowed to be here. He opened a bottle of wine that Father Anbak had given him. He regretted not being able to see Princess Lycia in the most splendid wedding dress. And it was Haru's father who had reported all of Kamai's plans to Salma. It was known that as for the two father and daughter Kana, they rebelled along with him without knowing anything about that plan at all. Meanwhile, Gaius and Julius waited half a day, but still didn't see Antamira surrender and were about to order troops to assault the city when they suddenly saw Wanter standing on the wall. Then he realized that Wanter had very likely colluded with Salma. Then Julius said that this could very well be a trap. They must retreat immediately. Wanter had used magic to create a giant screen for Gaius to talk with Salma, and the people in the city could also hear. Salma said that he had finished quelling the civil war, but couldn't put away his sword yet, because the Duchy of Eidonia was taking advantage of the chaos to invade his country's territory. The people hearing this were extremely panicked, not giving people time to react. Salma continued to accuse the Duchy of Eidonia and the dukes of having a very sinister conspiracy. He conspired to make Salma and the three dukes oppose each other, bringing benefits to himself. Salma also asked the people if they agreed to let them go while they were still intact or not, whether his actions deserved forgiveness or not. The answer was obviously no. Salma clearly declared that the kingdom of Elfredin would war with the Duchy of Eidonia. Gaius outside the city heard this and was angry, shouting that Salma was a little brat, daring to call the three-generation royal family's wish barbaric. Then Sama told Gaius, now he was bringing troops to the west. The target would be the capital Van of the Duchy of Eidonia. While he and the soldiers were hesitating outside the city, Sama's army would come and burn his country. Sama said that Gaius leading troops into Elfridon was an act of invasion, so he had represented all the people of Elfridon and officially declared war on Eidonia. When knowing that Sama was leading troops straight to Eidonia, Gaius showed great panic, and he ordered all troops to quickly return to protect the kingdom. Zoroa's butler had also informed her about Sama's troops attacking them, while Gaius was having troops cross a gorge to return to defend Eidonia. The princess of the Duchy of Eidonia greatly admired Sama because he knew what her father was thinking and was always one step ahead. Then she also guessed that the fastest way to return to her country was through the Uden Gorge. Sama knew this, so he had soldiers surround there. Indeed, Eidonia's troops had fallen into the trap, leaving them no time to react. The losses were very great, bringing more than 500,000 troops before they could attack. They were ambushed back, consuming nearly 400,000 troops. Then somehow the king called for food and soldiers, which increased to 200,000 people. Even so, when they reached the plain, it was already covered with flags of the kingdom of Elfridon. Gaius thought that the capital had fallen, but Julius told him to look at the castle. There were still many flags of the Duchy of Eidonia hanging there. Gaius was very happy, ordering the soldiers to quickly defeat these people to return to the castle. Sama received a report that Gaius was planning to attack straight here. Just as Gaius led troops back to the capital of Eidonia, Sama's troops had already arrived to meet him here before, and Sama had quickly directed all troops to line up to confront his army. The flag waved twice. The soldiers understood and formed a V-shaped formation. In the middle would be the area of the Imperial Guards and the Guard Cavalry. On the left was General Gibbs, on the right would be Princess Lycia with the support of Aisha. Everyone in position ready to fight. Sama and Kana stood above observing the situation, while both sides had already rushed into fighting. Gaius's soldiers were almost exhausted after many days of being ambushed on the way back to the country. So Sama's troops easily gave his entire army a devastating defeat. Those assigned to lead the army only needed to strike lightly to defeat a squad of Eidonia soldiers. Sama sat up here racking his brain thinking. Kana ran over and asked, saying that he wasn't concentrating on anything. His mind was like a person in the clouds. Sama smiled and said that the king's duty is only before and after the battle, right? He even mentioned that if his troops lost the battle, he would have to offer his head to beg for mercy for the generals. Hearing this, Kana startled and asked if he wasn't afraid of death, because he had just said he needed to offer his head. Then Sama covered his mouth, saying that perhaps he was an imposter because he didn't behave like the king of a national system. Then Sama admitted himself to be a coward. He didn't want to die and didn't want to see others die because of war. Sama let Kana know that this was the first large-scale battle that he really commanded, and he felt a bit uncomfortable witnessing the scene of soldiers sacrificing on the battlefield. Seeing his side at a disadvantage, Gaius told his son Julius to escape immediately. And although unwilling to abandon his father, Julius still had to flee to maintain the lineage. As for Gaius, he would stay to fight with Sama's troops to open a blood path for his son to escape. But being a good son, Julius said he would try to hold back the enemy troops for his father to escape. But Gaius refused immediately. He said that perhaps what Sama was aiming for was his head. Just by killing him, the conservative faction in the Duchy of Eidonia would collapse. Julius didn't expect Sama to come all the way here just to kill his father. Not wanting to say much, Gaius told Julius to go quickly. But Julius didn't want to leave his father like this at all. Gaius said that this was the king's order. If he wasn't there, what would happen to the country? Although reluctant, Julius still had to go. Before turning his horse to leave, he said his final apology to his father and then ran towards the capital. After that, King Gaius rode his horse up to attack, with only one target, the head of King Sama. Sama received news that the main force of Eidonia had withdrawn from behind, and King Gaius was advancing with all his might to reclaim what belonged to him. And after receiving Sama's order, Kana had spread her wings to fly out to meet him in battle. Lorwyn led a squad. When recognizing that ahead was King Gaius, he rode his horse and threw the spear right into the chest of that guy. Unfortunately, that guy was only a body double of the king. On this side, Kana had rushed in to fight with Gaius. He declared that his target was only the head of King Sama. He would fulfill the wish of 3 generations of the royal family right here. As for Kana, she wanted to be determined to take Gaius's head to present before Sama. However, Gaius had easily overwhelmed Kana, although she had the power of a dragon human. Seeing this, Sama had to control his puppet to rush up to support her in fighting him. Seeing this, Gaius became even more eager, saying that he would not be easily defeated by a puppet like this. Salma had also arrived here with a few soldiers. He introduced himself as Salma, asking if he was the one who had trampled on his kingdom. Gaius VIII, right? Hearing this, Gaius said that originally Elfridon was also the territory of Eidonia, so him setting foot on his own territory, what was there to be ashamed of? Then he was about to rush to Salma's place, but was stopped by the puppet. Salma ordered Kana to quickly burn the effigy, and Kana had launched a fire-type attack causing the puppet to explode along with that Gaius VIII. However, Kana was also affected by the explosion just now. She was thrown far away, lying flat on the ground. Salma quickly ran over to check on her, but before he could say anything, he was scolded to his face, saying that if he died, Lycia would be very sad. Then the two looked over to Gaius's place. Although injured all over, Gaius could still stand up after being hit by the explosion. He staggered towards Salma, his mouth still muttering about having to fulfill the dream of taking Salma's head, fighting for the pride of the Eidonia people. To protect the king's safety, Salma's archers had to shoot a rain of arrows to completely defeat him. Before falling, he still threw his sword hitting right in front of Salma, and his army had also been defeated and surrendered immediately when they saw their king defeated. Just hearing that her father had sacrificed, Zeroa was painfully in tears, and Salma had now successfully occupied the entire territory of the kingdom of Eidonia. Currently, Salma and everyone were in the castle of Eidonia. Lycia had to admit that the hall here was decorated very splendidly. Maybe even more money spent on decoration than their country. Lycia questioned Salma whether he had intended to conquer Eidonia for a long time. Salma's face froze, and he quickly explained to Lycia that since the time monsters appeared in the border area, he had been suspicious. Why would they send soldiers into the forest at the edge of the border to do what? And those weren't soldiers, they were fire monsters. Fortunately, at that time, Salma's puppet had successfully rescued the little girl who was scouting in the forest, or else it would have been a mess. Salma continued that the disturbance of those flame pyros was a tactic to make the people in the villages evacuate. Lorwyn informed Salma that Julius had run straight to the west to seek help from the Grand Empire, and being an ally of Eidonia, the Empire would definitely lead troops here to reclaim this place. Salma said that in this new country, there were no officials at all. It was indeed difficult to do, requesting to transfer some officials to this side. As for the people of Eidonia, they were very resentful towards Elfridon after being occupied by them. Poncho reported on the state treasury situation. There was no state budget and food, but weapons were filling the warehouses. Salma directed to sell weapons for money, proceed to distribute food until the inside of the castle stabilized. Hearing this, Poncho was sweating profusely, saying that if it was safe, he would transport immediately. Gives turn, the soldiers following discipline were extremely excited, so they could suppress the entire territory of Eidonia in one breath. Salma said that they could only fight to here. If the Empire intervened, it would be difficult. Lycia panicked when hearing about the Empire. Salma explained that he was sure they would intervene, but whether it was true or not, he didn't know. Because Eidonia had participated in signing the Human Declaration, if invaded, how could the Empire sit still and watch them? The clause that Eidonia was involved in was not accepting changes to national borders by force between humans. Worse, they would not hesitate to punish with force. Salma realized that there was a loophole in that declaration, so he didn't bother to participate at all. He told everyone to take advantage of dealing with post-war matters before the Empire countries arrived. Lorwyn and the army, wherever they went, the people avoided to there. Yuna had come to the capital of Eidonia to have an audience with Salma in a navy uniform, and when seeing the two of them talking intimately like this, Lycia showed extreme discomfort. Seeing Lycia's frowning face, Aisha quickly ran over to pat her head as consolation. Salma was a bit embarrassed, but quickly changed the subject immediately. Talk a little more, and it would be troublesome. He said that he called her here to implement a plan. Lycia was very surprised by that. Right after that, Salma and Aisha had used the image transmission device to organize a music program for all the people of Eidonia to watch. And he had invited Yuna along with other singers from Eidonia to take turns performing on stage, making the people very excited because this was the first time they could see the country and watch music. Eidonia was a military state, so all activities of the people were controlled. Now Salma had allowed everyone to freely do what they liked. The Grand Empire was a country with the largest military potential on the continent, and the head of the empire was a young empress named Maria. At the empire at this time, she had received news about Eidonia being occupied by Elfridon, and she knew that it was Gaius who had declared war first, not Salma. So Maria had said her younger sister Jane to go to Eidonia to negotiate with Salma in peace. Thanks to Salma's new policies, the people of Eidonia had a more prosperous life. Faced with this, Zeroa believed that Julius would never get Eidonia back, because Salma had given the people here a prosperity that had never existed before. He even told Poncho to go distribute food to the poor people in the city. Salma had invited Yuna and Tomo to disguise themselves and then go around the streets to inspect the situation. And Yuna had taken this rare opportunity to flirt with Salma because who knows, one day she might become a concubine. Salma had bought Tomo a new pair of shoes, so the little girl was so happy that she almost cried. And Salma had also bought Yuna a hairpin to thank her for supporting him throughout this time. Right after that, they had stopped under a tree to sit and enjoy the peace here. They hadn't even sat down properly when Jane suddenly appeared to talk to Salma. And Salma had quickly recognized that she was the person sent by the Empire to reclaim Eidonia. Jane felt very impressed by how Salma had changed a military state into a developing country like now. And she also didn't expect Salma to use the image transmission device to broadcast news for the people to watch. However, Jane still had to reclaim Eidonia for Julius according to the law of the Human Declaration. So she had suggested negotiating with Salma about this and leaving immediately. Just returning to the castle, Salma had given Aisha a lipstick that he had bought at the market for her. Lycia showed jealousy, so Salma had to quickly give her a very beautiful necklace. Salma was determined that he would protect this new family of his no matter how strong the enemy was.